My narcissistic mother orchestrated a police incident to force me home for Thanksgiving. I've been attending college out in Arizona for the past 3 years, a considerable distance from where my narcissistic mother and enabling stepfather reside in Maine. Over this time, I've intentionally maintained very low contact with them. I made sure to secure jobs or internships during the summers, providing a legitimate reason to remain out here and avoid returning home. About 4 months ago, my mother sent an email announcing that I would be coming home for Thanksgiving. Her stated reason was that she wanted the family together, and she had even hired a photographer to capture the happy family moments for a few hours. It was just another performance for show. I responded, explaining that I wouldn't be able to make it because I had a job on campus that required me to be there. Her reaction was predictable. She immediately contacted the school. Fortunately, the university staff were incredibly professional and protective. They informed her that since I was over 18, they couldn't disclose any information to her. When she escalated her demands and threatened to pull me out of school, the wonderful person I spoke with at the registrar's office delivered a perfect line. Good luck with that. He's on a full scholarship and pays for everything himself. It was a moment of genuine satisfaction knowing her leverage was non-existent. Realizing she couldn't bully the school into compliance or use financial threats, she resorted to having my enabling stepfather call me. This is the man who stood by silently from the time I was 12, witnessing my mother's physical abuse, constant degradation, and lies, doing absolutely nothing to intervene or protect me. There was no way I was going to engage with him now. I ignored all his calls. Next, she tried contacting my biological father. He thankfully just laughed at her manipulative tactics and hung up. We have our own complex history, but he's fundamentally a decent person who has struggled with his own mental health issues throughout his life. Thanksgiving Day arrived and I woke up feeling a sense of peace and freedom. The campus was closed, so I didn't actually have to work that day. I took advantage of the quiet morning, heading to the gym for a workout, and then enjoyed a leisurely breakfast at my favorite local cafe. I came back to my dorm feeling relaxed, ready to handle some laundry and prepare some chicken and noodles in my slow cooker for dinner. It was a simple, quiet day, exactly what I needed. I was just getting organized when there was an incredibly loud, forceful banging on my door. Before I could even react, the door was essentially knocked right down. Standing there were campus police officers and local law enforcement. It turned out my mother had called the police and filed a report claiming that I had told my 13-year-old sister that I was planning to bomb the school. I don't even speak to my younger siblings because they are so easily influenced and manipulated by my mother, so this was a completely fabricated and malicious lie. What followed was a surreal and deeply upsetting process. I was taken to the campus police building for questioning. They proceeded to search my dorm room and my car thoroughly. Of course, they found absolutely nothing incriminating. During this time, my resident advisor and 2 floor mates who knew me and were aware of my situation with my mother came forward and vouched for me, defending my character. I was also able to show the officers emails from my mother where she had explicitly threatened that I would be sorry for not coming home for Thanksgiving. The contrast between her threats and her false report was damning. After reviewing everything and finding no evidence to support the claim, the police apologized profusely for the distress and damage. I was allowed to return to my dorm room, and my resident advisor and I managed to work together to get the door back onto its frame. It was a moment of unexpected solidarity and help after such a traumatic event. Later that day, I received a phone call from my grandmother. It turned out that my mother had been arrested for making a false police report. The sheer audacity and desperation she displayed to try and force me back into her control were astounding, but the fact that it backfired and resulted in her facing legal consequences was a stark reminder that her actions have repercussions, even if it took something this extreme to reach that point. This story is infuriating, but that moment the school shut her down, chef's kiss, and her arrest, priceless. Subscribe if you relate to this level of crazy. Breaking the cycle, my daughter asked if she was pretty, and I responded differently than my mom did. This is a moment I wanted to share, partly as a form of personal validation, and partly to acknowledge one of the many specific ways my narcissistic mother's behavior left a lasting negative impact on me. I appreciate anyone taking the time to read this. When I was around 10 years old, my mom and I were waiting in her car for a train to pass. As I glanced in the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of myself, and for a fleeting moment, the thought crossed my mind, hey, I'm kind of pretty. Even today, thanks entirely to my mother's reaction, I feel a pang of shame just typing that sentence out. I had recently seen something on television discussing celebrity lips and was idly wondering if my own lips could be considered pretty. I decided they were, in fact, quite nice. Again, that feeling of shame surfaces. Making a critical error, I turned to my mom and asked if she thought my lips were pretty. Her reaction was explosive. She absolutely lost control. Trapped in that car with no possibility of escape, she launched into a furious tirade. She relentlessly scolded and shamed me until I felt like a worthless, ugly piece of garbage. Her words were something to the effect of, "Were you just staring at yourself in the mirror? Do you know what that's called? Vanity. Vain people stare at themselves in the mirror. Vain people think they are pretty. People who think they are pretty on the outside are ugly and hideous on the inside. People who are pretty on the surface are ugly deep down, and if you're ugly on the inside, you might as well be ugly on the outside too." This particular incident was the first time I clearly remember her saying something so explicitly cruel about physical appearance and inner worth, but it was far from the last. Her words dug deep and remained with me like a chronic condition. To this day, I find it nearly impossible to compliment myself in any way, whether it's my appearance, my artwork, or any other aspect of myself, without feeling a profound sense of shame, as if thinking positively about myself makes me a bad person. Similarly, I struggle immensely with accepting compliments from others. My automatic reaction is to deny, downplay, or deflect them. I am actively working on changing this because I recognize how much it affects my relationship with my husband and others. Fast forward approximately 25 years. I was sitting in my car waiting in a drive-thru line with my 8-year-old daughter. She was looking at herself in the rearview mirror just as I had done so many years ago. She turned to me with bright eyes and a genuine smile and asked, "Mom, do you think my eyes are pretty?" "I think my eyes are pretty." Her eyes are indeed stunning. A beautiful shade of hazel full of light and life. In that instant, the vivid, painful memories of my mom's cruel words and her explosive reaction flooded back. I could feel tears welling up in my eyes. I asked my daughter to turn completely towards me so I could look at her properly. I took a moment to truly see her, to appreciate her beautiful features and her radiant spirit. Then I responded, choosing my words carefully and intentionally. I told her, "Your eyes are absolutely beautiful. And you are beautiful on the outside, but you are even more gorgeous on the inside. You have such a kind and wonderful heart. I love you so much, beautiful girl." It's possible that my daughter will never remember this specific conversation, that it might not have made a significant impression on her in the way my mother's words did on me, but for me that moment was incredibly powerful. It felt like a profound opportunity to revisit a deeply damaging experience from my past and consciously choose a different path. I was given a chance to rewrite that painful script for my daughter. I want her to grow up knowing her own beauty, both inside and out, and to never feel ashamed for recognizing it or for hearing it from others. I want her to be able to simply smile and say thank you when someone pays her a compliment. And in doing so, I hope to learn how to do that for myself too. After 15 years, I discovered my chronic condition was curable, and my parents hid it. When I was around 6 years old, I began developing symptoms of eczema, also known as atopic dermatitis. The rashes initially appeared on my hands and arms. Over the next 15 years, the condition progressively worsened. Now at the age of 21, the rashes cover well over 60% of my body. They are constantly bleeding and react painfully to even simple movements or contact with water during showering. It has become incredibly debilitating. I'm currently typing this using my thumbs on my phone because the condition has spread to my palms and the tips of my fingers. Throughout my childhood and adolescence, I repeatedly asked my parents to take me to see a doctor about the worsening rashes. Both of them were full-time professionals with successful careers and more than sufficient income. Despite their financial means, they consistently refused to seek proper medical evaluation for me. I specifically remember asking for an allergy screening, which they rejected, citing the potential expense. This was around the same time they were purchasing a third car for themselves, a 2006 Miata convertible, highlighting the skewed priorities. Years later, when I finally earned enough to get my own healthcare coverage and underwent an allergy screening, the cost was only $20. By the time I was able to access healthcare independently, I was already in the process of distancing myself from them. For years, they had dismissed my symptoms, telling me I was being overdramatic and that the physical manifestations were simply in my head. This medical neglect was compounded by other forms of mistreatment. When I was 19 and still attending college, they effectively cut me off and made me homeless after I questioned my gender identity. I haven't spoken to them since then. Thankfully, I've been able to navigate my transition journey on my own with positive results. and have secured stable housing so that specific situation is managed. 2 days ago, I responded to an advertisement seeking medical volunteers for research on atopic dermatitis. I met with the doctors involved in the study. During our consultation, I learned something astounding and heartbreaking. They are researching new medications, an injection and a pill that would merely serve as competitors to existing treatments. These treatments, I was told, have been successful and FDA approved for treating severe eczema for years. For years, there has been an actual medical solution to the constant suffering I've endured. A solution to my sleepless nights, the bloodied sheets from scratching, my inability to run, swim, or engage in physical exercise without exacerbating the condition, and waking up to flaky, itchy skin covering my legs. At worst, with the proper treatment, I might have experienced only minor side effects like watery eyes, but I could have had clear skin as early as middle school. The doctors I spoke with were visibly concerned and critical of the weak, ineffective, topical medications my parents had allowed me to use over the years. They pointed out the severe side effects and long-term issues associated with prolonged use of those treatments and expressed clear disgust at the level of medical neglect I had experienced from my parents. Hearing this from medical professionals was the validation I desperately needed after 15 years of being told my condition was not that serious or was psychosomatic. If it weren't for COVID-19 precautions, I honestly would have broken down and cried in their arms. Instead, I just wept in my seat. I have been approved to begin participating as a volunteer in their medication study, and all related treatments and appointments will be covered, in addition to receiving payment for my participation. This feels incredibly significant, especially since I lost my job several months ago because my condition had worsened to the point where I was incapable of performing most types of work. Having essentially free and comprehensive healthcare for my severe eczema is an immense relief and feels exhilarating. Reflecting on everything, I realized how crucial my decision to distance myself from my family was. If I had remained under their influence and control, constantly being told my symptoms weren't real or weren't that bad, I likely never would have independently sought out the information and resources that led me to this potential treatment. The nurses mentioned that suicidality rates are high among individuals with my level of severity, and having lived through it, I absolutely believe that. I wanted to share my story as a cautionary tale so that others can understand the profound and crippling damage that can result from parents refusing to trust their children when they repeatedly tell them they are sick and in pain. For years, I was dismissed and neglected. Overdramatic? Absolutely not. Successfully navigated our wedding, despite Mom wearing a wedding dress. Leading up to our wedding day, we knew we had to anticipate the behavior of my fiance's narcissistic mother. We had heard stories, seen the patterns, and fully expected some level of disruption or attention seeking. One of our biggest concerns, based on her history and need to be the center of attention, was that she might try to upstage the bride in some way. We couldn't have predicted the exact method, but we certainly planned for the possibility of something outrageous. Our primary defense strategy against her need to dominate the visual space was to make our wedding a costume party. The invitation clearly stated it was a costume celebration, encouraging guests to come dressed creatively and wildly. This was a strategic move specifically designed to neutralize any attempt she might make to stand out by wearing something inappropriate like, say, a wedding dress. And sure enough, she arrived wearing what appeared to be a wedding gown. However, our plan worked beautifully, with everyone else dressed in elaborate, colorful, and often eccentric costumes from superheroes and historical figures to fantasy creatures and pop culture icons. Her white dress didn't make her stand out at all. In the sea of vibrant and imaginative outfits, she simply looked like just another guest in a slightly formal, but ultimately unremarkable costume. She wasn't able to steal any attention, she just blended into the wonderfully chaotic and joyful atmosphere. It was incredibly validating to see that particular tactic fail so spectacularly. Another anticipated moment of potential disruption was our first look photos. We wanted a private, intimate moment before the ceremony. We briefed our entire wedding party beforehand, making them aware of the potential for interference and enlisting their help as a buffer. When my fiance's mother attempted to crash our first look, bursting in to try and insert herself into the moment, our wedding party was ready. They jumped into action, expertly stalling her with conversation, distractions, and polite but firm redirection, giving us just enough time to complete our photos without her presence. Their support in that moment was invaluable and truly appreciated. Later, while we were taking wedding party photos, she attempted another classic narcissistic maneuver, public humiliation disguised as storytelling. She started making fun of my fiance, trying to launch into one of her favorite demeaning stories from their childhood. It was a calculated attempt to embarrass him in front of his closest friends and family. However, because everyone in our wedding party was aware of her tactics and fully supportive of us, they simply ignored her. They didn't react, didn't laugh, and didn't engage, completely deflating her attempt to create drama and discomfort. It was powerful to see her efforts met with such a unified front of indifference. Of course, not every attempt could be completely thwarted. She managed to stage a situation where she deliberately missed the bus transport provided to the venue. This required someone to specifically drive back and pick her up. Naturally, she used this as an opportunity to generate drama, complaining loudly about how she had been left behind and how horrible the people on the bus, and by extension us, were for supposedly abandoning her. It was a predictable grab for sympathy and attention, creating unnecessary hassle and painting herself as the victim. Dinner presented another significant challenge. My fiance's mother is particularly fond of giving toasts that are not heartwarming congratulations, but rather thinly veiled public humiliations, often recounting fabricated or exaggerated stories about how awful or unlovable my fiance was as a child. She also has a history of forcing him to sing a specific embarrassing song before every single dinner throughout his life, a ritual she might try to resurrect. To prevent this, we scheduled a friend to read a lengthy, humorous story during the dinner service. The story was genuinely funny and engaging, but it also took up approximately 20 minutes, effectively consuming all the time and space that might have been used for spontaneous toasts. By the time the story concluded, most people had finished eating and were already starting to get up and move toward the dance floor. The look on her face, realizing she had been prevented from giving her intended toast, was priceless. If looks could cause physical damage, hers would have triggered a catastrophic event. We also wanted to ensure our first dance wasn't interrupted. We didn't announce when it would happen. Instead, we arranged with the DJ to play a specific song just before ours. The DJ privately told us which song that would be. When our cue song started playing, we quickly exchanged a look, literally ran to the dance floor and started our dance last minute. This element of surprise gave her no time to plan or execute any disruptive action before we were already enjoying our moment. As expected, when it came time for cleanup at the end of the night, she was nowhere to be found assisting. The task of tidying up fell, as it often does, to my family and the dedicated members of our wedding party who had helped us throughout the day. Despite the predictable lack of assistance from her, we survived the day and, more importantly, celebrated our marriage surrounded by people who genuinely love and support us. We made it through. Our battle plan mostly worked, minimizing her ability to control the narrative or steal the spotlight. And as a final victory, she never managed to find out our hotel room number, ensuring our post-wedding privacy remained intact. It was a challenging day because of her presence, but with careful planning and the incredible support of our loved ones, we successfully navigated it and focused on the joy of getting married. Okay, wearing a wedding dress, that's peak narcissism, but their costume party wedding, absolute genius strategy. What's the most clever way you've seen someone handle a narcissist at an event? Comment below. Against my dad's wishes and without his help, I got accepted into a doctor pharmacy program. Growing up, my father made it clear he wanted me to pursue a career in construction. After finishing high school, I initially followed that path, working in construction for about 6 months. I quickly realized I absolutely hated the work, and frankly, I wasn't good at it, leading to me being fired. My father's reaction was one of intense anger and disappointment. He told me I was good for nothing and destined to go nowhere in life. Refusing to accept that fate, I took a job working as a meat cutter, earning $12 an hour. Through sheer determination and hard work, I managed to save over $10,000 in just 1 year. With that money, I decided to enroll in university. My father's response to my ambition was negative and resentful. He accused me of thinking I was superior to him, likely because he himself had only barely completed high school and had no post-secondary education. Despite earning well over $100,000 a year at the time, having no debt and owning his home outright before my mother eventually left him, he absolutely refused to contribute a single penny towards my education. I paid for my first 3 years of university tuition entirely in cash, relying solely on my own earnings. While attending school, I worked 20 hours a week to cover living expenses and collected the necessary prerequisites for pharmacy school. During the summers, I worked 2 full-time jobs simultaneously to save up enough money to pay the upcoming year's tuition up front. There were times when I was $2,000 in debt, working 30 hours a week on top of an extremely demanding course load, and also struggling with severe physical complications from IBS. Despite all this, I received no support or assistance from my father. Beyond withholding financial help, my father actively tried to undermine my academic efforts. He provided no quiet or suitable space for me to study at home and created a constant atmosphere of emotional, physical, and verbal abuse towards both my mother and myself. I remember trying to study for crucial final exams, and he would demand I drop everything to perform demanding tasks for him, like rewiring the basement. When I would explain that I couldn't do it right away but would gladly help after my exams, he would become completely ballistic, interpreting my prioritization of my studies as disrespect. The abuse intensified significantly after my mother divorced him and moved out in September 2017. I was in the process of completing my final 3 prerequisite classes required to apply to pharmacy school, and the daily abuse and sabotage continued. He would watch me struggle financially, knowing I was barely able to afford food and gas to get to school, and still offered no help whatsoever. The stress of living in that environment and managing everything on my own has been immense. At 23 years old, I've developed a significant amount of gray hair over the past 3 years, a physical manifestation of the constant stress. One particular night stands out vividly. I was downstairs playing video games after finishing a midterm exam. He came down and without any apparent provocation, began screaming directly in my face, becoming completely ballistic once again. He started making threats of physical harm given his size, and he's a large, imposing man much bigger than me. I knew I was not capable of defending myself against him. The screaming and threats continued relentlessly. In that moment, seeing no other way to de-escalate the situation and feeling genuinely unsafe, I threatened to call the police. This only seemed to enrage him further. I made the decision to leave immediately, driving away in the middle of the night to stay at my maternal grandparents' house. The next day, I skipped school and waited until I knew he had left for work. I returned to the house with my grandfather's SUV and quickly loaded up all of my belongings, moving out permanently. Since that night, he has attempted to contact me numerous times, sending random pictures or generic messages like "what's up," but never offering any form of apology or acknowledging his abusive behavior. I have not responded to any of his messages. My last memory of him is backing out of the driveway, shouting a final defiant word at him, and driving away into the night, leaving that toxic environment behind. I successfully completed my last prerequisite class in April and submitted my application to pharmacy school. This week, I received the news that I was accepted into the Doctor of Pharmacy program. This achievement feels monumental because I accomplished it almost entirely on my own, with absolutely zero support from my father and limited ability for my mother to help due to her own financial constraints. I am the first person in my entire family to ever attend university, let alone be accepted into a professional doctoral program. The journey has been incredibly challenging, marked by constant stress and hardship, which is evident in the amount of gray hair I've accumulated at a young age. Despite everything, this is the proudest I have ever been of myself. My father said I was going nowhere. He was wrong. He said you would go nowhere and you got into a doctorate program? That is the ultimate mic drop against a narcissist. What a victory. Like and subscribe if you love this story, and tell me your favorite post from today.